Welcome to GBN Tonight. With me, Bev Turner, live from Washington, D.C. President Trump secured peace in the Middle East last week. Well, now he's turned his attention to Ukraine and Russia. Zelenskyy will be meeting him in the White House tomorrow. And earlier today, President Trump made a phone call to Putin. We're going to be getting a statement from President Trump any minute now. Stay with us tonight. Lots to come in the next hour. First, though, your headlines with Sam Francis.
Bev, thank you very much. Well, live from London, the top story tonight at 8. Donald Trump says he has made great progress with Vladimir Putin after a 2-hour call between the two leaders. They've reportedly agreed to meet in Budapest in Hungary for a sit-down that Mr. Trump says he hopes could bring an end to the war. Their call also set up high-level talks next week, led by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The US president says he'll brief Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House tomorrow and that he still believes he can get both men in the same room. Ukraine's president will, of course, be there seeking fresh US support after Russia launched one of its biggest overnight assaults, more than 300 drones and 37 missiles. Due to those Russian attacks, emergency power outages have been implemented across all regions of Ukraine tonight. Earlier, Mr. Trump warned that he could send long-range Tomahawk missiles if Putin refuses peace talks. If approved, that move would put Moscow and other major Russian cities within striking range. Well, as Bev mentioned just moments ago, we are expecting to hear live from Donald Trump in the Oval Office later tonight, so do stay with us for the very latest coming to us from Washington later this hour. In other news, MI5's boss says the agency is facing one of the most dangerous periods since 9/11, with near-record levels of terror investigations and fast and rising threats from hostile states. Ken McCallum has warned state actors from China, Russia and Iran are stepping up espionage, with MI5 disrupting Chinese activity of national security concern in just the past week. In his annual speech, he revealed agents have foiled 19 late-stage terror plots since 2020, while Iran backed groups that have attempted more than 20 lethal attacks in the last year. McCallum says that MI5's mission has undergone its biggest shift in 2 decades as the agency adapts to what he described as a new era of security threat.
MI5's fight against terrorism remains intense. My teams are running near-record volumes of investigations. But we are also having to contend with a second menace of equal or even greater scale in fast-rising state threats. In 2025, a more hostile world is forcing the biggest shifts in MI5's mission since 9/11.
Meanwhile, MPs are launching a formal inquiry into the collapsed China spy case as pressure mounts on the government to explain just what went wrong. The Joint Committee on National Security Strategy says it will examine how the case was handled and the national security questions it now raises. It follows the Prime Minister releasing 3 witness statements from that case after being accused of a cover-up. He insists it would have been absurd, though, for him to intervene in a CPS investigation. The 2 men accused of spying, Mr. Cash and Mr. Berry, have denied any wrongdoing as political fallout over the failed prosecution continues. Well, earlier, Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride spoke to us here on GB News.
National Security Advisor, you would think, would be across something as significant as this, but the suggestion is that it was all weighted or focused on his deputy, a civil servant. And I think most people would say that just sounds totally incredulous. Look, it does feel a bit like a cover-up. We've had a Prime Minister that just 48 hours ago was telling us that the evidence that's now been released could not be released, and yet changed his position yesterday in Prime Minister's questions. What we are saying is let's get to the bottom of exactly what happened. Let's have that information. Let's have the correspondence, the memos, etc. Around this activity so that we can make a proper assessment.
And Chancellor Rachel Reeves says higher taxes on Britain's wealthiest will form part of next month's budget, as she's vowed to fix the nation's finances without, she says, a return to austerity. Speaking in Washington at IMF meetings, Reeves dismissed what she called the scaremongering and bleating of her critics, insisting her plans are about fairness and stability. She hinted that the top earners will shoulder more of the burden to repair the public purse. But Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has said the Chancellor has made a huge mess and doesn't know how to clean it up.
She should be doing is cutting spending We have outlined £47 billion of savings that she could find. We effectively put out a shadow budget at our party conference. If she had any sense, that's the sort of stuff she would do, but I doubt she will. I think she's just going to come back with more and more tax rises. She had an opportunity at the last budget to actually come up with some policies that would help people get on. Instead, she chose to give bungs to the trade unions and to tax businesses who are now closing. People are leaving the country. I'm not here to say that everything the Conservatives did was perfect, but all Labour have done is make everything worse. We have a weaker economy, we have weaker borders because we have a weak Prime Minister and a weak Chancellor.
That's it from the newsroom in London for now. I'll hand you straight over to Washington and Bev Turner.
Do you want a coffee? You don't want any? Do you want a cherry Coke?
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Bev Turner. It is a special edition of the show this evening. Jacob will be joining us in just a moment down the line from London. He's also got Tessa Dunlop with him in this hour. But we're waiting to hear from President Trump. Of course, he's still riding high on securing peace in the Middle East last week, but he's turned his attention now to Russia and Ukraine. He's going to be making a statement imminently. We know that he spoke to Putin this afternoon. We'll be bringing you the statement that he issued just after that phone call. It was about 3 hours ago now that they spoke. And we know that Zelenskyy will be in the Oval Office with President Trump tomorrow as well. So just moments after President Trump spoke to Putin, his press secretary, Caroline Levitt, spoke to the media assembled outside the White House. And this is what she said.
He just put out a truth statement. If you haven't seen it yet, I encourage you to look at it. But I was just talking with the president and the Secretary of State and the Vice President, and it was a very good and productive call. It lasted more than 2 hours. There were various issues that were discussed. President Putin congratulated President Trump for solving the conflict in Israel and Gaza and bringing peace back to the Middle East. He also thanked the First Lady for her efforts to bring back children and save children in this brutal conflict. And the president feels like great progress was made on this call. They also agreed to have a high-level senior staff meeting convened as early as next week, which will then be followed by a meeting very likely between President Trump and President Putin as well. They talked about Budapest as being a location for that. So as you all know, President Zelenskyy is coming to the White House tomorrow, so these discussions will continue. I think he thinks it's possible, and he would, of course, love to see that happen. But right now, there were discussions and plans are now being made for the Russian side and our folks, led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to meet, and then for President Putin and President Trump to perhaps meet again. But I don't think the president has closed the door on that at all. I don't want to get into that, but as I just said, the president and President Putin discussed meeting together in Budapest, and President Trump will talk about that opportunity with President Zelenskyy when he's here at the White House tomorrow.
So that was Caroline Levitt speaking just about an hour or so ago in the White House, outside the White House on this beautiful day here in Washington, D.C. We are going to be going live to President Trump imminently. We will, of course, bring you his statement as soon as he speaks. Let's now talk to Jacob Rees-Mogg, who you are used to seeing normally in this position, and Tessa Dunlop is down there as well in London. Good evening to you both. It's great to see you. Jacob, thank you for letting me sit here this evening in place of you. But the viewers will be delighted, of course, to see that they are still getting to hear from you this evening. So, President Trump, it is almost impossible to keep up with the pace of the news agenda whilst he is in the White House. As soon as one ceasefire is secured, it looks like he's now working towards the next. Tessa, how significant do you think events of the next 24, 48 hours might be?
I think it is important, and I think it actually speaks more to Putin's weakness in many ways than it does to Trump's strength. And I really hope that Trump remains clear-eyed. We shouldn't ascribe to Putin dark powers and this aura of invincibility which we continually gift him by suggesting that every bit of turbulence in the world somehow lands on his doorstep. Actually, he's got a stagnating economy. He no longer is able to command influence over his neighbours in the Caucasus, and he is not successfully claiming Ukraine as his own, which was the intention. 2 years ago, he was trying to drive his tanks into Ukraine, and now we're lucky. And it's a sign of desperation, actually, if he's able to send a drone to hit a civilian soft target.
Jacob, how significant is it, do you think, that Zelenskyy is coming to the White House tomorrow under the auspices of wanting to talk about these Tomahawk missiles? As far as we know, he's coming here to ask for more arms. But this phone call now having been made to Putin, the statement we're going to get from Donald Trump, perhaps we're not looking at an escalation here, but maybe a de-escalation, potentially an end to this war.
It's very difficult to know. And if you think of Zelenskyy's visits to President Trump, one was a disaster, one was a great success. Which will tomorrow be? Now, we assume that Zelenskyy won't want to give in, won't want to allow Russia to maintain its presence in Ukraine, will want Ukrainian territory back. And President Trump may be asking for a settlement that requires Ukraine to give territory away. So I think it's very hard to know what tomorrow's meeting will be like. But the threat of escalation, the threat of Tomahawk missiles, must be one that may be helpful to bring Putin to the table, because Putin expected to win this war within 2 weeks. And here we are, 3.5 years on, and he still hasn't. His economy is under strain. I understand the oil pipelines and so on are being hit by the Ukrainians, and therefore it's harder for Russia to get the revenue that it needs to continue this war. So it may be that Putin is getting to the point where he needs peace more than anybody else.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting point on the Russian economy.
Sorry, Tessa, go on.
I was just thinking it's a really interesting point Jacob's made on the Russian economy. The reason why Putin stayed in power for a quarter of a century, by the way, isn't because he's bludgeoning his people and locking every single one of them up. It's actually because there's a kind of modus vivendi where they've never had it so good, but apparently the food is OK in Moscow. They found an alternative to Netflix. 500,000 of them still enjoy Schengen in the EU, by the way. You know, it is still functioning, the Russian economy, but actually their wartime economic footing, by all accounts, is running out of steam. Rail workers have been asked to drop 3 days a month. The biggest car manufacturer down to a 4-day working week. The pips will start squeaking, and when the screws turn on Putin domestically, then he's in trouble.
Yeah, very much so. I was talking to a source here today who was saying that actually the Russians are not frightened of the Tomahawk missile threat. One senior Russian official they were discussing, they thought that was quite amusing, and they said we were able to counter Tomahawks in the 80s. So that isn't something that they are worried about. But I think you're right. The worry will come from the domestic position that Putin finds himself in, the economy in Russia, and how popular he is with the Russian people. But there was also a suggestion that international powers underestimate the capacity of Russians for misery and pain at their peril. They will be able to cope with more loss of life in a way that we in the West are not. We don't have those same reserves, let's say, when it comes to that sort of desperation that they're staring down the barrel of, quite literally. Jacob.
Yes, well, I think you're absolutely right. And if you look at the Crimean War and the Second World War, Russia was able to absorb much greater losses than the West did. And the Crimea is interesting because our losses lead to Florence Nightingale, complete change in how the army operates. Their losses were enormously greater than ours and don't lead to any change at all. So there is something in the Russian military that accepts these high losses. But there are indications that the Russian population aren't as happy as they were, that there was a protest in St. Petersburg within the last few days with people chanting opposition slogans against Putin. That's very unusual. And the other part of Russian history, one, you're absolutely right, they can absorb losses, but also it was said famously of the Russian Tsars that it was an autocracy tempered by assassination, and this broadly has carried on since the Tsars have gone, that when they're fed up with the ruler doesn't necessarily last forever.
Tessa, just about Donald Trump for a moment, about the president and his ambition to be a leader of peace and an achiever of peace, in fact. Of course, we know he would love to have the Nobel Peace Prize. At the moment, where do you think he sits in the annals of history in terms of being a peacemaking leader? And if he is able to broker this particular deal, where does that leave him, in your expert opinion as a historian?
Well, he's really complicated. I was going to say for people like me. I think he's complicated, actually, for a lot of individuals and countries. It's fascinating just looking at the Russian orbit alone. So normally you'd expect Russia to sort out any ructions between Azerbaijan and Armenia. But actually, it was America that brokered that peace, another sign of Russian weakness. And while I long to discredit so much of what Trump does, I can't bear him arbitrarily pulling up trade barriers and just getting rid of all the international American aid that he distributes around the world so China can come on in and take over with its soft power and its own incredible economic muscle. I do think that Trump has to be given credit for trying. My concern is that he ascribes way too much power to Putin. We know that actually the leaders, the Soviet leaders during the Cold War, loved to be considered an equal with America. There's nothing that the Khrushchevs and the Brezhnevs enjoyed more than going off to visit President Eisenhower or President Nixon. It really did make them beat their breasts back at home and internationally. And I worry that Trump doesn't realise just how much more power he has in his camp relative to little, shrinking Putin.
And Jacob, brilliantly put, Tessa, and Jacob, you've seen so many politicians in action, up close and personal as well. The more that we see of President Trump, how do you describe his strengths and his skill set? Because he is, of course, completely non-conventional, particularly in his delivery.
Indeed, you're absolutely right. The line about Teddy Roosevelt was that he would speak softly and carry a big stick. And Donald Trump doesn't bother about the speak softly bit. He speaks loudly and carries an enormous stick and therefore forces people to do things. And you see this with the tariffs that made people open their markets to the US in a way that more diplomatic approaches hadn't achieved. He's got NATO to increase its spending, which American presidents have wanted for decades, and none of them was able to achieve. He's managed to achieve a remarkable amount in Israel and Gaza. Whether that's completely successful, who knows? But this combination of toughness and action, the bombing of Iran was a phenomenal thing to have done that really changed the dynamic between Israel and Hamas. So he is a big figure, and he's willing to use American power. He's not ashamed of American power, and therefore he's been very effective so far.
OK, we will take a quick break, Tessa and Jacob, whilst we wait for President Trump to speak at the White House, just down the road from where I sit right now. When we come back after the break, we're going to remind ourselves of some of the previous meetings that President Trump has had with Zelenskyy. Don't go anywhere. This is GBN Tonight with me, Bev Turner.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Park Estate and the anti-litter champion. Great to see you. What made you think of this, Duncan?
I think just the huge amount of litter. I said to the children, when I was their age, we would be able to go from this beautiful estate, which I'm so lucky to live in, to Witham or Chelmsford or Braintree, and you'll never see any litter. And today it's so different. And you know, we're thinking we've got to affect some kind of behavioural change. And the best place to start with that is with young minds. It's so baffling to me that people don't prioritise litter, because if you think about it, all the ills of society that our civic leaders are trying to sort out are characterized by, you know, antisocial behavior, lack of personal responsibility, selfishness, lack of community spirit. And if you toss a plastic bottle or a disused coffee cup or a wrapper out of your window, one is displaying exactly the same characteristics as, you know, we need to resolve all the other bigger antisocial problems.
What reaction are you getting from today's children? Are they a bit astonished about the fact that they shouldn't throw litter around?
Yeah, no, every time you ask the question, has anybody seen anyone littering? Up went 500 hands. Have you ever littered? And up went to sort of 10 very brave little hands.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Bev Turner, live from Washington, D.C. It's a special show tonight because we're waiting for President Trump to make a statement, we believe, on the situation between Russia and Ukraine. He spoke to President Putin earlier today on the telephone into the White House, and we know that Zelenskyy will be meeting him tomorrow in the Oval Office. At the moment, the press are not invited to events in the White House tomorrow, but of course that may change. We don't know exactly what President Trump is going to talk about when he makes his way in front of the cameras any moment now. But let's remind ourselves before tomorrow what the previous meetings have been like between President Trump and Vladimir Zelenskyy. There was, of course, the memorable occasion where things got a little bit heated. Let's just remember what happened.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country.
Depending on how you feel about President Trump and Vladimir Zelenskyy will very much dictate your reaction to that particular exchange. That was, of course, February earlier this year. More recently, of course, things became a little more convivial in the Oval Office, and so they met up again in August, I believe it was, and this is how it went.
Had a lot of good discussions, a lot of good talks, and I think progress is being made, very, very substantial progress in many ways. We have, I guess, the seven very powerful leaders from Europe, and we're going to be meeting with them right after this meeting, and thank you very much for being here.
If I can, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings.
So that was August the 18th, and they will meet up again tomorrow. We don't know at the moment, as I just said earlier, how much access the press are going to be given tomorrow, depending on, I guess, how events turn out. Let's go back to the studio in London. Let's talk to Jacob Rees-Mogg and Tessa Dunlop, who are down there, as we wait for President Trump to come out and make his statement. This relationship between the two of them, Tessa, it is quite interesting. Zelenskyy absolutely depends on President Trump for support in this war. But as we saw in February, his patience had run thin. I think by August, Trump's patience had actually run thin with Putin. And it feels like he is a sort of parent in this relationship, trying to pull these two leaders into line to just get this conflict sorted out. Do you have any prediction of how the mood might be between Zelenskyy and Trump tomorrow?
Well, I'm interested and relieved that there aren't going to be any cameras. I can't really imagine what Trump's like off camera. He's one of those people that you imagine all his professional life as a performance. But I think what's fascinating, and I was talking to Jacob about my research regarding the Paris Peace Conference. This was when we carved up Europe in the wake of World War I, and the way in which the Great Three, and Britain was included in the Great Three at that time, it was France, Britain and America, talked in very disparaging terms about the East European leaders, the victors of the pack. But nonetheless, these were men who they referred to as, you know, trying too hard. They were either Sybarites, effortful, corrupt, permissive, I mean, any word that could be used to denigrate them. And what you saw there with Trump, really, was him expressing the same almost level, if not of revulsion, of disdain for this mini player on the east side of Europe. And I think subsequently, since he's tried to actually address Putin, get in the weeds just a little bit, because Trump's a big picture guy, he's actually started to accord Zelenskyy some respect.
Jacob, is that how you see it?
Well, I think it's important for us to remember that Zelenskyy is on the side of right and that Putin started this war, that Putin is the butcher who has allowed many thousands of people to be killed, who launched an illegal war to attack Ukraine and try and take its territory. And I'm broadly a Trump supporter, but I thought the way Zelenskyy was treated in February was not the right way to treat somebody who is heroically defending his own country. And there are wonderful lines. Do you remember when he was first coming to the fore and the war had just started, and he said he didn't need a ride, he needed weapons, that he was going to stay and fight. He is Ukraine's Churchill, and he is such a courageous man. And so I hope that Donald Trump will realise which side is on the side of right and will treat Zelenskyy very well tomorrow and not be taken in by Putin. Putin's not a fool. He may be a bad man, but he's not an idiot. And he's done very well in getting what he wants out of Trump in the last 8 months or so.
I think the feeling that I get from talking to people amongst the White House is that they don't have quite such a complimentary view of Zelenskyy, if I'm completely honest. And that there was always a sense that Ukraine, as we knew before the conflict, there was accusations of corruption within Ukraine. It was quite readily read about in the mainstream media about the fact that Ukraine was perhaps one of the most, if not the most corrupt country in Europe. And I think the lack of patience that Trump, and it was J.D. Vance, of course, we have to remember, the vice president, who really did light the touch paper under that conflict back in February. And I think they were at that point thinking, we are giving you so many billions of dollars. And if you remember, there was that reference to the way that even how he dresses, and the pictures we're seeing here, which I think was the more recent meeting, he had actually smartened himself up. There's a sense amongst this administration of decorum. They are true conservatives through and through. They expect you to dress a certain way in the White House. Everybody is in business attire all the time. And I think this was the February pictures, isn't it, where Zelenskyy was still wearing his sort of casual clothes. And on a very superficial level, they don't like it. They didn't like it when he was in the room. And then the next time he came in his suit and somebody did make a comment and they made a bit of a joke about it. But they expect certain adherence to respectful values. And there was definitely a sense in which they felt Zelenskyy was not adhering to that, and that he was there asking for money and asking for weapons and asking for support, and that he wasn't fulfilling the behaviour levels that they expected he should do. It's hard to know now how Donald Trump is feeling. Sorry, go on, Tessa.
Now, just to address two of those points, one about what Zelenskyy was wearing, it's worth bearing in mind, of course, that when Churchill goes over to the White House in World War I, and I think by this time America is our ally, and he wears his giant military onesie, it looks like a onesie anyway, and he wears it with pride. This is a man who's been fronting down the Nazis for years on their own. I mean, Britain and her empire on its own. And America had no problem. Okay, granted, Roosevelt wasn't a Republican, but I think the argument that, these are conservatives and that they thought that Zelenskyy disrespected them, it was just an excuse to crush him. Had he worn a suit, argument could have been, where's he got all the money for that Gucci suit or whatever brand he particularly chose? And the other thing is there's a big gulf, and I speak to this personally because I'm married to someone from Eastern Europe. They don't say thank you. I've stopped giving my mother-in-law Christmas presents because she doesn't say thank you. And I'm sort of weaned on English etiquette. I like a great big gosh, and I don't get one. I realise that it isn't because she's not appreciative. It's just not in their lexicon. And likewise with Zelenskyy, he's now learned, you'll hear now, he trots out the word thank you at the end of every sentence. But it's cultural as much as anything.
He does, yeah. Yeah. Jacob, do you have an opinion on that? Is it just that there is a cultural difference here?
Well, I think they wanted to ambush Zelenskyy in the meeting in February. I agree with Tessa, it didn't really matter what he was wearing, and actually I think the symbolism of saying, look, I'm in it with the troops on the front line is not a bad symbolism for a president who has to show he's on the side of his people. I think they wanted to ambush him because at that point they thought that it was Zelenskyy that was the obstacle to peace. I think they've subsequently discovered that Putin will take whatever you give him and then ask for more, and doesn't himself want peace, he wants victory, and that Putin must be defeated. He is a bad man who has killed thousands of people, who has taken territory, who has broken the basic principle of international law, which is that you don't invade another person's territory. And as for Ukrainian corruption, yes, I'm not going to dispute that. That was supposed to be considerable. But Netanyahu, who we are all supporting, was actually in court with corruption charges about the same time as he became Prime Minister. So you don't deal with your allies' morals, you deal with your allies' rightness of cause. And that's why I'm on the side both of Ukraine and indeed of Israel.
Mm. And, in fact, of course, President Trump did ask the Knesset the other day whether he could be pardoned, didn't he? Whether Netanyahu could actually be pardoned for those accusations of corruption. We're going to take another quick break, I believe now. We are waiting for President Trump to come and talk to us. And when we come back from this break, also, I will give you the statement that Trump issued just this afternoon when he had got off the phone call with President Putin. Don't go anywhere. This is GBN Tonight with me, Bev Turner.
Hello again, very good evening to you. I'm here with your GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. For many it is going to be dry as we go through the rest of today and into tomorrow, though pretty cloudy and quite grey as well. That's because the high pressure, which is keeping things dry and also leading to the calm winds, is trapping some moisture, so the cloud, it's not really going to go anywhere particularly fast. That being said, there are some breaks around across some central southern parts of Scotland into northern England, perhaps some southeastern parts of England and to western Wales will see some breaks in the cloud. And where we get those breaks, well, temperatures could take a bit of a drop, could be a touch of frost, also some fog patches, so watch out for those. But most places sticking with that blanket of cloud, so temperatures not dropping much under that. There will be a few spots of rain here and there overnight, and that's the same as we go into tomorrow morning, particularly across northern and eastern parts of Scotland. A bit damp for some here. Further west and across southern parts of Scotland as well, largely dry but grey and cloudy to start the day. Similar across Northern Ireland and also similar across much of England and Wales, albeit, yes, there could be a few pockets of mist and fog around and some brighter breaks across perhaps some eastern, southeastern parts of England, but also a little bit of damp weather too around coastal parts towards both the east and also around some parts of the southwest. A few outbreaks of drizzly rain quite likely. Otherwise, it's again looking quite similar to today really for many. So quite grey, quite cloudy, limited bright spells developing, where you get some sunshine, feeling warmish I suppose, but temperatures around average and feeling quite cool under the cloud. A similar day on offer as we go into Saturday as well, at least to start. Later on, we are going to see some wetter weather pushing across initially Northern Ireland, but that is going to feed its way eastwards as we go through the latter part of the weekend. So Saturday, yes, largely dry, but grey and cloudy. By Sunday, things are looking wetter and windier with more showery rain to come on Monday. Bye-bye.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Bev Turner, here in Washington, D.C. It's a special edition of the programme tonight. We're waiting for President Trump to speak any minute now on the Russia-Ukraine war. Let's talk now to Ukrainian MP Alexei Goncharenko, who is hopefully going to tell us his thoughts on the situation. Alexei, great to see you again. Everything crossed this evening, fingers crossed, hope in everybody's hearts that we can see another ceasefire. Are you optimistic that we're looking at that situation within the next 24, 48 hours?
Hi, and we have really optimism about possible window of opportunity to end this war. It's clear that President Trump is gonna make his best in order to stop this war. And we saw that he changed his attitude towards Russia, because before he tried to be very kind with Russia, and the apogee of these wars, the summit in Alaska in Anchorage, where Trump literally prepared a red carpet for Putin, and it didn't work. Now we see that President Trump is speaking the right language with Putin, saying about tomahawks, missiles possibly delivered to Ukraine. Also, we heard that President Trump said that India is gonna stop buying Russian oil, which would be a huge blow on Russian economy. So we see that President Trump now is speaking right language with Putin, the language of strength, the language of force. And this is the only language that Putin understands. So finally now we have a real hope that it will work.
What does Ukraine need right now, apart from, of course, obviously, a lasting peaceful resolution? What is it that the people need?
We need peace as soon as possible. We're super tired, we're exhausted with this war. If we're speaking not about peace, we need weaponry, we need seizing of Russian frozen assets, we need more sanctions against Russia, we need a lot of things. But all of these things are aimed on one objective, is to have peace. So if President Trump will use his leverage, will use his force, will use his authority just to make Russia to go to a real negotiation and to stop the war, that would be great.
Alexei, what is the closest or most accurate number that you have heard about the numbers of people who have lost their lives in Ukraine during this conflict?
I don't have the exact number. The numbers are top secret in Ukraine, both in Russia. But we're speaking about hundreds of thousands of people.
And we saw the statement earlier from Donald Trump after the phone call saying that Putin had applauded him on achieving peace in the Middle East. He said we spent a great deal of time talking about trade between Russia and the United States when the war with Ukraine is over. How do you feel as a Ukrainian when you hear that Donald Trump is talking about trading with Russia? Obviously, this is one of his techniques. He leverages, doesn't he, potential business opportunities. He's done this in the Middle East. Is that a concession that Ukrainian people would be happy with? Maybe isn't the right word, but would be prepared to accept that Russia would become a trading partner with America if it meant that there was peace secured?
We want peace as soon as possible. We want this war to end. If the price is that Russia is going to trade with the United States, okay, let them try it. Let them have a trade. But I just want to ask to everybody to be absolutely clear about one thing. Russia is an enemy of both United Kingdom, United States. So weaker is Russia, better is for United States and United Kingdom and Europe security. Stronger is Russia, it's worse for United States, United Kingdom and Europe security. So it's very easy. And then it's the decision of the United States, United Kingdom and Europe what trade to have with Russia, what relationship to have with Russia. So it's up to these countries. But once again, for Russia, the West is the enemy, the most important, the most dangerous one.
OK, Alexei, thank you. Alexei Goncharenko there,
thank you.
Ukrainian MP, and we wish you all the best of luck with events of the next 24, 48 hours. Let's talk now to Greg Swenson, who is, of course, the head of Republicans overseas. He's here in Washington, D.C. as well. Greg, great to see you. So we're waiting on President Trump now. He handles these things with enormous transparency. That's what always strikes me. The communications from the White House is the best in the world, I think, in terms of any political administration. And what do you think we might be about to hear, Greg?
Yeah, you're right, Beth. He's totally transparent. The entire administration is great at communicating, and so he put this out on Truth Social right after the phone call. So good for him. It's hard to predict what to expect, but I think as you've been discussing quite a bit, Beth, the president's not afraid to use economic. Wave a carrot in front of Putin, the possibility of getting back into the Western trading alliance, and Russia always behaves better when they're actually engaged with the West, not fighting the West. So I think there's a great opportunity for the president to use economic leverage and use that economic carrot and bring Russia back into the fold. And remember, it's really important for the president and for America to make sure that Russia doesn't become too much aligned with China, and China is the real adversary that we're concerned about now.
He's also, in his statement this afternoon, Greg, has said that at the conclusion of the call that happened earlier this afternoon, we agreed there'll be a meeting of our high-level advisors next week. The United States initial meetings will be held by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, together with various other people to be designated. How good is Marco Rubio at these sorts of negotiations? I think we've lost Greg Swenson there. Let's go back to our panel. Let's go back to Jacob Rees-Mogg and Tessa Dunlop in the studio there. One of the things that struck me, both of you, and I keep seeing it repeatedly watching this administration up close, is how Trump 2.0 is much more magnanimous about sharing. You may disagree, Tessa, but sharing the praise and sharing the accolades, and he isn't afraid to say who he has so much faith in this team. He isn't claiming credit for this. He's saying he's going to hand it over to Marco Rubio and other people on his team to carry out these negotiations, even though he will, of course, go and see Putin in Budapest as well. Tessa?
Maybe, but there's a wonderful meme going around at the moment where Trump invites, is it the Pakistani president to come and attribute the praise that he had given Trump off stage, on stage, down the mic, and Melania from Italy, her eye roll behind Trump, you know, oh, not this again. I think Trump is absolutely fantastic at managing his own PR, Truth Social and beyond. And to be honest, because it's so incredibly fresh, and we would consider it, especially the British, as really, until Trump came along, something you did not do, that kind of braggart posturing, and yet Trump gets away with it. Maybe we all need to rewrite the rules.
I just don't think it plays well to a sort of British palate. We don't like a braggadocious person, do we? We're ever so humble, and I think that's sometimes why Trump alienates people. If he could just tone down the bragging a little bit, I think he would go down much better with more people. But Jacob, let me just ask you before we take another quick break. We are waiting for President Trump to talk imminently, but what would the implications of a ceasefire, of peace in Ukraine be for British people? I'm thinking particularly the cost of living.
Oh, you're absolutely right to mention that, because if there's peace, then Russian oil and gas supplies come back on. That fills a gap that has been leading to much higher prices. I think we would see a significant fall in the oil price and a significant fall in the gas price. So our heating costs should go down to where they were.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jacob. I'm sorry to interrupt you, especially on your own show. Donald Trump is speaking. Let's take that live now from the White House.
We just had a call, as you know, with President Putin. I thought it was a very good call, so we'll talk about it maybe later. But it went very well. We're here today to announce a historic victory for American women, mothers, and families. With the actions I will outline this afternoon, will dramatically slash the cost of IVF and the treatment and many of the most common fertility drugs for countless millions of Americans. Prices are going way down, way down. I want to thank Libby Horn, who is the Senior Vice President of Fertility of EMD Serrano. So I want to thank you. Let's see here. That's what I thought. I thought it was you. Thank you, Libby, very much. And let me also thank the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy, Jr., whose wife destroyed the people on The View yesterday. I have to say that. I'm not going to ever get into an argument with her. And you've decided, you learned that a long time ago, right? She did a great job, actually. Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick. Thank you, Howard. Secretary of Labor, Lori Chavez de Rima. Thanks, Lori. Howard, thanks. CMS Administrator, Dr. Mehmet Oz, who's a fantastic guy, and he's done really well. FDA Commissioner Marty McCary. Thank you, Marty. Senator Katie Britt, who got me started with this whole thing when she called up to say there was a bad ruling by a judge, right? We got to do something, sir, and we did it very quickly. Probably in 24 hours it was done. Congressman Richard Hudson, a great guy, and his wife Renee. Richard, hi, Richard. And Advocate Samantha Bush, who's a very respected person. For years, American couples struggling with infertility have faced crushing costs in their quest to start a family, and IVF is among the most expensive treatments of all. A single round of IVF in the United States can cost up to $25,000, can actually go a lot higher than that, and many couples require multiple rounds for a successful pregnancy. A major reason for these high prices is the excessive cost of the drugs involved. The number one fertility drug used in IVF is currently 700% more expensive in the United States than the rest of the world. And, you know, we're ending all of that. It's called favored nations, and we're ending it, and we're ending it pretty fast. Nobody thought we'd be able to do it, and we've done it. Drugs are going to come down. Drug prices are coming down 400%, 200%, 600%, numbers that nobody's ever seen before. Great for Medicare, Medicaid, even Social Security. Great for everything, I think, Dr. Oz. So that's something that's, to me, it's very exciting. I'm bugging him and Bobby all the time. How are we doing with that? And we're doing really good, Bobby. Right? It's really going good. Other countries are agreeing to it because if they don't, we put tariffs on them, and then they agree. So it's amazing. It's amazing how that worked out. But as an example, in London, you'd buy a certain drug for $130, and even less than that, I guess, $88 as of a count a month ago. And in New York, you pay $1,300 for the same thing. So now we're going to be paying, instead of $1,300, you'll be paying about $150. And they'll be paying $150 too. We're going to pay the same thing. Favored nations. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And we've been ripped off by the whole world for a long period of time. One of the most popular fertility drug regimens costs over $5,000 per cycle, as an example. Wow. Largely as a result of these unsustainable prices, 70% of the employers do not offer insurance that covers IVF. Therefore, most couples with fertility challenges are paying these costs entirely out of their own pockets, which is not really possible to do. Oh, look who we have. Look at that, the great Maria Bartiromo. I didn't know. Did you get put into the regular pool pack? That's very good. Yeah, that's good. Nice to see you. I'm doing an interview with her in a little while. In the Trump administration, we want to make it easier for all couples to have babies, raise children, and start the families they've always dreamed about. That's why today I'm pleased to announce that after extensive negotiations, EMD Serono, the largest fertility drug manufacturer in the world, has agreed to provide massive discounts to all fertility drugs they sell in the United States, including the most popular drug of all, the IVF drug Gonal-F. So it's Gonal-F. Is that a proper pronunciation? Close enough, right? Gonal-F. As part of this agreement, EMD Serono will list their fertility drugs online at trumprx.gov at very, very heavily reduced prices, prices that you won't even believe. And ultimately, that's because of the favored nations. In addition, the FDA will be working with the company to expedite review and approval of another common fertility IVF drug, and currently it's selling in Europe. It's Pergoveris. And that's a sound nice name. Pergoveris. Why can't you name them nice, simple names? Nice, easy names. Doesn't matter. If it works, that's all we care about, right? Upon approval, this drug would directly compete against a much more expensive option that currently has a monopoly in the American market, and this will bring down costs very significantly. And the other one's going to have to come down also. Finally, EMD Serono has agreed that all future drugs and everything that it develops and sells in the United States will be offset at most favored nation prices. I've been after this for a long time, and we started the process in the last administration, and then we had a little thing called COVID that came up. We had to focus on that, did a good job on that too. And they'll bring a significant portion of their drug manufacturing back to the United States. So they're going to bring it largely back into the United States, and that's for a lot of reasons, but primarily because of the election result, November 5th, and maybe most importantly because of the tariffs, because if they do it here, there are no tariffs. So we're going to be very close, I think, by the end of this year. We're going to be very close to $20 trillion in investment. As an example, the Biden administration had less than $1 trillion, substantially less than $1 trillion for 4 years, Maria. Can you imagine? 4 years, less than one. We're going to break $20 trillion of investment, and we're already over $17 trillion, and that's in 8 months. Can you believe that? And he was at less than $1 trillion. And in addition to that, he had open borders, allowing millions of people to pour in. What an administration that was. Worst president in history, by far. As a result of these actions, the per-cycle cost of drugs used in IVF will fall by an estimated 73% for American consumers, and the numbers are going to actually be very substantially higher as time goes by when it really kicks in. For most of, I mean, think of those numbers. You know, I told the story last time because we were with Pfizer and Pfizer's doing something very similar. But I told them that my first term, I was so proud of myself because I was the first president in 28 years where drug prices went down for the year. And you know what they went down? 1/8 of 1%. But I was so 1/8 of 1%. Now I'm getting them down, Maria, 500, 600, 800%. In some cases, even more than that. It's hard to believe. But I was proud. I said, oh, wow, I'm the first one. 1/8 of 1%. And I was proud of that. Now I realize, and I called a news conference. Some of you were at that news conference, actually. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. We've gone down by 1/8 of 1%. And now we're going down 500, 600, 700, 800%, Richard. So it's really something. For most administrations and all of the people involved in this kind of thing, this action would be a crowning achievement of their agenda for fertility health. But for us, it's really just the beginning. It's just a start. It's one of many things we're doing. Today, we're also taking historic steps to vastly expand access to insurance coverage for fertility care, including IVF, something that, as you know, was not covered. Effective immediately, for the first time ever, we will make it legal for companies to offer supplemental insurance plans specifically for fertility. It's never been done before. We're signing it in today with what we sign. Americans will be able to opt in to specialized coverage just as they get vision and dental insurance. They're going to get fertility insurance for the first time. So I don't know. I don't know how well these things are covered. I see the Democrats like to take credit for all of the things we do. We do the things and they take the credit. But I figure if you do enough of these, eventually people are going to figure it out. The Democrats have done nothing. This will make all fertility care, including IVF, far more affordable and accessible. And by providing coverage at every step of the way, it will reduce the number of people who ultimately need to resort to IVF because couples will be able to identify and address problems early. The result will be healthier pregnancies, healthier babies, and many more beautiful American children. It's a big factor. It's a big deal. I'm asking all employers to make these new fertility benefit options available to their employees immediately. The initiatives I've just announced are the boldest and most significant actions ever taken by any president to bring the miracle of life into more American homes. And I will say Katie was great. As you know, she's a great senator from Alabama. She's the first one that told me about this. I had not known too much about it, and we worked very rapidly together, didn't we, though?
Mr. President, you
We had everything passed, and Alabama then took care of it and passed it. Within a week, everything was done. Really, it was something. So I want to thank Katie, Brett. There's no deeper happiness and joy of raising children, and now millions of Americans struggling with infertility will have a new chance to share the greatest experience of them all. So I'd like to thank all of the people that are here, and I think we'll start with Dr. Oz and Ms. Horn. We'll go through the list and we'll listen. And yesterday I did this, and I stood for about an hour and a half as people spoke. And I said, this time I'm sitting right there, and I'm going to watch you. I stood for an hour and a half like this. I said, you got to be kidding. Here we go. It was one after another, and it was wonderful listening to them. But I said, if I have to do this every day, Bobby, should I stand or sit? Thank you, Bobby. Please, Dr. Oz.
Okay. Mr. President, I'm going to jump in here real quick. I want to start by thanking President Trump. Sir, from the very first phone call we ever had, your support was strong. It was steadfast. It was unwavering. And because of you, millions of Americans are going to have a greater opportunity to bring the greatest gift, in my opinion, life into this world. Your support, your administration's support, it's a game changer. All of us here today are aligned. This is a celebration of life. It's a celebration of parents. It's a celebration of families. And it's a celebration for those people who want to one day be parents themselves. I think every parent can attest, and I certainly do myself, that the greatest gift that God has ever given me is the ability to be a mom. We want more people to have that opportunity. We want to make that easier and more affordable. IVF is what makes the difference for so many families that are facing infertility. So you've seen the numbers. It's either 1 in 8 couples, or some people say as much as 1 in 6, are actually experiencing issues with fertility. It's 9% of males and at least 11% of females that are facing these challenges as they work to build their family. The recommendations today that President Trump has set forth are going to expand IVF coverage to nearly 1 million more families, and they're going to drive down cost significantly. Mr. President, this is the most pro-IVF thing that any president in the history of the United States of America has done. And Mr. President, it's your leadership. You are the reason why the Republican Party is now the party of parents.
Well, that is President Trump in the White House there announcing plans to slash the cost of IVF in the US. That is, of course, a big pro-family announcement. We're also expecting some breaking news lines on a potential Russia-Ukraine peace deal. We will bring those to you as we get them, but right now it's 9 p.m. I'm Patrick Christie's Tonight.
When it comes to China, the UK needs to defend itself resolutely against threats and seize the opportunities that demonstrably serve our nation.
The Chinese have been spying on us, so I took revenge. We just want to give him a box of not British secrets. I know, but it's not British secrets, that's the thing. Do you only accept boxes that are? Yes, absolutely, they hacked our computers, but 2 can play at that game. We're just here to have a look at the computers.
Computers?
Yeah, we just got a call back to base just to say that there's been an issue with some of the software. I think they should be expecting me. And I have mastered the art of spycraft. The Yangtze River is running upstream today. No? No? Have you got the package? But in other news,
I've started a petition to boycott Maccabi Tel Aviv. There is no space for violence or any thugs to come into Aston or indeed Birmingham. That is why I urge everyone to sign up to this petition. Boycott Maccabi Tel Aviv.
That is an absolute load of rubbish, but now no Israeli fans can travel to Birmingham because police can't guarantee their safety.
Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately.
President Trump is offering asylum to Europeans fleeing the migrant crisis. On my panel tonight, we have got broadcaster Linda Jubilee, senior reporter at Guido Fawkes, Ellie Wheatley, and the ex-Labour Party advisor Matthew Larzer. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. A Gaza gang MP has helped ban Jewish football fans from Britain. Next.
Very good evening to you from the newsroom just after 9 o'clock. The top story tonight, Maccabi Tel Aviv fans have been banned from Aston Villa's Europa League clash in Birmingham over safety fears. Police have labelled that match high risk after anti-Semitic attacks on Israeli fans at a game in Amsterdam last year. The move has triggered outrage, with Tory leader Kemi Badenoch calling it a national disgrace, while Israel's foreign minister has said it is shameful. Jewish groups, meanwhile, say it's perverse that fans are being excluded rather than authorities tackling anti-Semitism. Breaking tonight, Donald Trump has said he has made great progress with Vladimir Putin after a 2.5-hour call between the two leaders. They've agreed to meet in Budapest for a sit-down that Mr. Trump says he hopes could help bring the war to an end. Their call also set up high-level talks next week, led by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The US president says he'll brief Volodymyr Zelenskyy at the White House tomorrow and still believes he says that he can get both men in the same room. Ukraine's president will be there, seeking, of course, fresh US support after Russia launched one of its biggest overnight assaults. And due to those Russian attacks, emergency power outages have now been implemented across all regions of Ukraine. Earlier, Mr. Trump warned he could send long-range Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine if Putin refuses peace talks, and if approved, that move would put Moscow and other major Russian cities within striking range. Here, MI5's boss says the agency is facing one of the most dangerous periods since 9/11, with near-record levels of terror investigations and fast and rising threats from hostile states. Ken McCullum has warned state actors from China, Russia and Iran are stepping up espionage, with MI5 disrupting Chinese activity of national security concern in just the past week. In his annual speech, he revealed agents have foiled 19 late-stage terror plots since 2020. McCullum also says MI5's mission has undergone its biggest shift in 2 decades.
MI5's fight against terrorism remains intense. My teams are running near-record volumes of investigations. But we are also having to contend with a second menace of equal or even greater scale in fast-rising state threats. In 2025, a more hostile world is forcing the biggest shifts in MI5's mission since 9/11.
MPs, meanwhile, are launching a formal inquiry into the collapsed China spy case as pressure mounts on the government to explain what went wrong. The Joint Committee on National Security Strategy says it will examine how the case was handled and the national security questions it's now raised. It follows the Prime Minister releasing 3 witness statements from the case after being accused of a cover-up. He insists, though, it would have been absurd for him to intervene in a CPS investigation. The 2 men accused of spying, Mr Cash and Mr Berry, have denied any wrongdoing. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride spoke to us earlier here on GB News.
National Security Advisor, you would think, would be across something as significant as this, but the suggestion is that it was all weighted or focused on his deputy, a civil servant. And I think most people would say that just sounds totally incredulous. Look, it does feel a bit like a cover-up. We've had a Prime Minister that just 48 hours ago was telling us that the evidence that's now been released could not be released, and yet changed his position yesterday on Prime Minister's questions. What we are saying is let's get to the bottom of exactly what happened. Let's have that information. Let's have the correspondence, the memos, etc. Around this activity so that we can make a proper assessment.
And Chancellor Rachel Reeves says higher taxes on Britain's wealthiest will form part of next month's budget, as she's vowed to fix the nation's finances without a return to austerity. Speaking in Washington at IMF meetings, Rachel Reeves dismissed what she called the scaremongering and bleating of her critics, insisting her plans are about fairness and stability. She hinted that the top earners will shoulder more of the burden to repair the public purse. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, though, says the Chancellor has made a huge mess and doesn't know how to clean it up. Well, let's also just quickly bring you a breaking development on that situation where Maccabi Tel Aviv fans have been banned tonight from Aston Villa's Europa League clash in Birmingham over security fears. A statement just in on social media from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, saying, and I quote, "This is the wrong decision." Continuing, "We will not tolerate anti-Semitism on our streets," and adds that the role of the police is to ensure all football fans can enjoy the game without fear of violence or intimidation. So the Prime Minister there giving his thoughts on the situation, saying that the decision to ban Tel Aviv fans from that Europa League match is the wrong decision. That's the news on GB News. I'll hand you straight back now to Patrick.
Yes, good evening. We do start with that breaking news that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans have been banned from Aston Villa's Europa League clash in Birmingham over, quotes, safety fears. So
many residents have raised concerns about the football match, which is due to take place on the 6th of November. Maccabi Tel Aviv. We've all seen those harrowing images from Amsterdam. I've started a petition to boycott Maccabi Tel Aviv. There is no space for violence or any thugs to come into Aston or indeed Birmingham. That is why I urge everyone to sign up to this petition. boycott Maccabi Tel Aviv.
Yes, so Jews aren't safe in Birmingham. Aston Villa Football Club were due to play Maccabi